to Great Britain and found that you were actually even bigger there than you were in the U.S.?
Yeah,
And
a little bit.
Did it feel good?
Yeah, it felt very good, but it was scary.
Yeah?
I mean, oh, come on. You don't need that. My ears is hurting still from listening at that crap. Excuse me.
Before Elvis shook his hips or the Stones tore up the stage, there was a sound that shook the streets first. Raw, pounding, and impossible to ignore. They called it the Bo Diddley beat. It wasn't polished, it wasn't made for the radio. It was born from church stomps, street corners, and a stubborn kid who built his own guitars out of scraps. Bo Diddley didn't just play music, he invented a pulse that powered rock and roll before rock and roll even had a name. But while his groove carried stadiums, his own pockets stayed empty. The system crowned others kings while the man who laid the foundation got pushed to the margins. This is the story of the innovator, the rebel, the man who turned his name into a rhythm and never stopped reminding the world who really lit the fire. Elvis was born into chaos and passed around before he could even walk. His teenage mom couldn't raise him, so he ended up with her cousin Gussie, who basically became his mom and gave him a new name, Elvis McDaniel. When Gussie's husband died, she packed up the family and took them to Chicago's South Side, right into the middle of a city overflowing with sound. That move changed everything.
My birth mother didn't care one way or the other. You know, she would come around and look to see what I was doing.
Chicago was noise and soul everywhere. Church choirs, street corner guitar players, blues leaking out of clubs. Elvis jumped into it all, picking up trombone and violin at church, good enough to sit in the orchestra. But it wasn't the fancy stuff that grabbed him. What really stuck were the wild, foot-stomping, hand-clapping services at sanctified churches. Those rhythms drilled into him, and he carried them for life.
I was taught classical music, and I was taught by Professor O.W. Frederick at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Chicago, Illinois, where I was raised up at.
Outside church, he was scrappy. He boxed, strutted around, earned the nickname Bo Diddley. Nobody's sure if it came from an old insult, a comedian, or that one-string diddly bow he loved fooling around with. He was already building strange guitars on his own, square and jagged, looking like something from the future. By his teens, he was a regular on Maxwell Street, the South Side's loudest open-air stage where hustlers, bluesmen, and dreamers all collided. With his friend Jerome Green shaking maracas, Bo bounced between little groups, blending jump blues, street beats, and Muddy Waters' new electric sound. Clubs like the 708 gave him real stage time, smoky rooms where he carved out the sound that later made him impossible to ignore.
The one and only Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley.
Bo laid down a couple of rough tracks, one called I'm a Man and another that carried his own name, and pretty soon Chess Records polished them up and threw a full band behind him. That self-titled cut broke through fast, hitting the top of the R&B charts and flipping the whole game on its head. It wasn't about smooth chords or fancy changes. It was all about a raw, pounding rhythm that felt closer to a street stomp than a blues lesson. That pulse became his signature, the beat that later powered half of rock music without most people even realizing where it came from. Funny thing was, he stumbled onto it by accident, messing around with a cowboy tune and tripping into something brand new. That mistake turned into the playbook for everyone else. Buddy Holly, the Stones, the Animals, the Who, acts who carried his groove into packed halls and cashed in on it. Bo didn't see those same paychecks. His label knew he was special, but they pushed Chuck Berry harder. Berry's clean image and teenage story songs made him easy to sell to white audiences, so the machine went full throttle behind him. Bo, with his grit and edge, got recognition, but not the same rollout. He felt it too, and spent years saying the system had robbed him. He'd even sold off his publishing early just to make ends meet. So while everyone else was raking in money on his sound, he was stuck surviving on the road. Meanwhile, his fingerprints were everywhere. Holly's Not Fade Away was basically his groove in disguise. Elvis dipped into it when convenient. The Stones built their early rep off his blueprint, even touring with him before they realized covering his songs in front of him felt like stealing straight from the source. Bo was the spark, but everyone else lit the fire and ran off with the rewards.
mean, oh, come on. You don't need that. My ears is hurting still from listening at that crap. Excuse me.
Bo never bit his tongue. He openly clapped back at the idea that Elvis somehow invented rock, reminding anyone who'd listen that he was out there first. He didn't care if people thought it was cocky. It was the truth. That same stubborn streak showed up on the Ed Sullivan Show when he was told to sing a safe country tune. Instead, he ripped straight into his own song, sent the crowd into a frenzy, and got himself banned from the show. He wore that ban like a trophy. The charts told a different story, though. He had records that hit hard in the R&B world, songs full of swagger and rhythm, but only one track managed to slip into the pop charts, and not for long. Even some of his most iconic songs were him just joking around, tossing out made-up names and lines that later became classics. As the new decade rolled in, the spotlight shifted. Barry, Presley, Holly, and a wave of white rockers were being blasted into bigger markets, while Bo's name slowly faded from the mainstream. He was the blueprint, but the business didn't let him wear the crown. History tried to frame him as Chuck Berry's direct competition, when really they weren't even in the same lane. Berry was telling teenage stories. Bo was all rhythm, attitude, and mischief. He could make people laugh mid-song if he wanted to. That was the irony of his whole career. The man who built the groove that carried rock across the globe, who crafted guitars that looked like they fell from another planet, who literally turned his own name into a beat, never saw the rewards that should have come with it. Instead, he became the loud, unapologetic reminder that in music, the ones who start the fire don't always get to collect the heat.
You went to Great Britain and found that you were actually even bigger there than you were in the U.S.?
Yeah, a
And
little bit.
Did it feel good?
Yeah, it felt very good, but it was scary.
Yeah?
By the time rock bands from across the pond came crashing into the U.S., Bo's sound was already there waiting for them. Groups like the Stones and the Animals weren't just borrowing his style. They were basically building whole careers off the groove he'd created years earlier. In the UK, kids treated him like a secret manual for how to start a band, some even naming themselves in his honor. But while those acts blew up into global icons, Bo back home was watching his own spotlight fade. The songs that once cracked charts were fading into remember when territory, and the label wasn't putting the same push behind him anymore. The real sting came off stage. Bo was saying out loud what a lot of artists only whispered, that the industry had robbed him blind. He claimed he hadn't seen proper money from his biggest songs, the very ones fueling other people's stadium tours. His early contracts and publishing deals left him boxed out of royalties, and he never stopped reminding interviewers of it. It wasn't until decades later that he admitted any serious checks even started to show up, way too late for what his music was really worth. Every time he heard another band smash one of his rhythms, it wasn't just pride, it was also proof of how unfair the system had been. His home life carried its own mix of highs and controversy. He married multiple times, had kids, and lived through relationships that turned heads. One marriage in particular, to Kay Reynolds, lasted over 20 years, but drew backlash in the Deep South because it was interracial. People close to him often said he was hard to deal with, but not in a cruel sense, more because he refused to bend, wouldn't play industry politics, wouldn't let executives push him around. That stubborn streak kept him respected, but also left him without friends in the boardrooms where money and influence moved. By the 70s, his star wasn't burning the same way. The big shows and screaming crowds turned into smaller clubs and nostalgia circuits, sometimes sharing bills with younger bands who were living off the very blueprint he'd laid down. Meanwhile, his signature beat was echoing through stadiums, only now it was The Clash or the Stones, cashing in on it, while Bo himself was still grinding for recognition, still underpaid, still stuck on the outside of the fortune his music had built. Musicians never let Bo's name fade. The Stones had already been lifting from his playbook in the early days, sneaking riffs from his songs straight into their own hits. Punk kids like The Clash built their sound on his pulse. George Thorogood went so far as to drop him right in the middle of the Bad to the Bone video, turning Bo into a living piece of rock mythology, a pool hall king who didn't need to say a word. Even Hollywood couldn't resist. He showed up on the big screen in trading places, sliding into a cameo that stamped him as effortlessly cool. By the end of the 80s, he was everywhere again, stitched into pop culture. Nike's huge Bo Knows campaign pushed Bo Jackson to the front, but Bo Diddley was the original, and the ad leaned into that. Of course, he ended up in court with Nike over it, because nothing in his career came without a fight over who actually owned what. The institutions finally caught up too. He was welcomed into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with full honors, recognized as the man whose rhythm literally had a name. Legends lined up to pay respect, and younger players looked at him as the root of it all. Sharing stages with B.B. King, Les Paul, Clapton, and others in his later years only proved that his sound wasn't tied to an era. It was eternal. U2, Tom Petty, and a whole new wave of artists carried his fingerprints in their music, even if their fans didn't always know the source. But no matter how many flowers he got, the bitterness never left. He was still talking about the money he never saw, still tired of being the one who gave the world a beat, but never got the bank account that should have followed. It was the same contradiction from the start. Bo was worshipped, imitated, and studied, yet underpaid to the end.